I become less interested in JFK, 9/11, those big events, than just a general seeing that there is madness. The things that we're given on the news, they are a bit crazy, aren't they? I mean, war, like I
Well,
said.
this whole Noam Chomsky thing, I don't know what Chomsky actually thinks about that. From what I mean, maybe there are other situations in which he's said that he does believe the official story. I don't know. His attitude when he's asked about that is to say it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah,
Because what he wants to concentrate on are the indubitable facts about
exactly.
what's going on and the crimes that are continuing to go on. But let's just say that he does have his own concerns about 9/11.
Yeah,
I can understand why he would want to keep quiet about that, because
exactly.
that would give an excuse to all sorts of people to shout him down. I noticed others do that. I mean, Craig Murray has been the ambassador to Uzbekistan during the Blair years. He has been asked about his position on 9/11, and he's non-committal about it. He's
Robert
not
Fisk as well. Robert Fisk,
right.
the Middle East
Right.
correspondent. He said, I think he kind of gave an answer that he didn't really want to talk about. He said, my focus is on the Middle East. If I had more time.
Yeah.
But no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, you can't just. That's the problem with some people in the alternative media. They think that because someone in the mainstream doesn't state a position, that means that that they're selling out or something. But Chomsky's got a lot
I can
less
see
to
that it can
lose.
have that effect. So, what do you mean by gatekeeper? Are you a conscious gatekeeper or an unconscious gatekeeper? And I can see how being an unconscious gatekeeper can very easily happen, where people say, "Oh yeah, no, and Chomsky doesn't go for that when he's the pinnacle of rationality. I'm not going to go for that either, and I'm going to look down my nose at anybody who does." I can see how those sort of social things can kick in. But on the other hand, I can understand it as well. I'm not in that boat because I do talk about 9/11. Would I keep quiet about things to protect greater truths and things? Yeah, maybe there are a couple of issues I might. Which of course I won't mention because that would go against what I'm the purpose of doing that. Yeah, there might be a couple of issues in which I would do that, but they would be strategic. That's right, in the same kind of way. Does that make me a gatekeeper? If so, then that's why I perhaps imagine that people like Chomsky have made the decision they've made for what they consider to be good reasons. Yeah.
I mean, he's built up a reputation over, half a century. And if he came out as a 9/11 truther, I mean, as you said, what would actually be the point? I don't know. He doesn't know what happened any more than anyone else, and with it, he's got a lot more to lose than I have.
Well, that's true. I know that Richard Gage, they presented him something, didn't they? There was a photograph on Architects and Engineers 9/11 Truth of Richard Gage standing with, I think, giving him a portfolio of information. There was Chomsky, so he obviously agreed to have a photograph taken. But yeah, I suppose we've made the point, haven't we? I can understand it anyway. Yeah.
What's the state of the 9/11 now in 2018? I guess the two camps are so firmly entrenched.
I get the
Do you
impression
think
a lot
it
of people
even
are
has?
bored with it. When I go to 9/11 Blogger, which I used to go to quite a lot, and it's, I think, pretty good actually, one of the best sources to go for latest information, that sort of thing. It's calmed down tremendously over the last 2 or 3 years. Less and less is being talked about it, I think. But that's not to say there aren't some good things. There are some good things. I mean, the Alaska University project. Well, it wasn't the university itself, was it? It was Leroy Hulsey. Dr. Leroy Hulsey was conducting research, and he is a professor at that university. So, just to make it clear, the university itself is not endorsing this, but he, as a professor, has a team working on Building 7. I don't know if they've come out with their final analysis yet. But that's very significant because they have analysed it from as far as I can see, a strictly scientific point of view, and find significant holes in what the US National Institute for Standards and Technology have said about the issue. And you have to ask, why would the National Institute for Standards and Technology, have said things that turn out to be analysably false, such that they should not have made those, well, let's call them mistakes. One questions whether they were mistakes.
Yeah.
Very serious stuff. Should be in the mainstream.
Yeah,
There may be a tiny bit of reporting in the mainstream about it, actually. but only a tiny bit.
I just think the whole the mainstream conspiracy camps, it's just got so entrenched now. I don't know. The more time goes on,
Yeah,
you wonder. I mean, probably something will come out. I mean, they'll release another 10 seconds of something hitting the Pentagon, I imagine. I'm guessing that will happen. Something will leak out or will be brought out. But
well, this is why all I do is I just plough on, kind of middle of the road. Not because I'm trying to be middle of the road, just true to, I hope, true to the vision that I have, and don't try to become more extreme, or don't try to throw it all out and say, oh, I'm not having anything to do with the 9/11 Truth movement anymore because it's lost its way, as some people do seem to have done. No, I just carry on because I still have concerns about it, and hopefully people therefore won't see me as a crazy and won't see me as a conformist. I think if more people could fill that middle ground, then there would be less ammunition to criticise from either extreme. And then we would end up talking about things that really matter and avoid nonsense and avoid propaganda. That's the hope. But a lot of people. Well, it's not attractive, is it? That's the thing. It just isn't attractive to go on and have an hour and a half interview with an academic about something. Well, tends to turn a lot of people off. But I think that's the only way to get at things. People actually know what they're talking about and are level-headed.
Yeah. In terms of people's views on it, I can't see it changing too much unless some footage comes out. I'd be very surprised if anybody's view really changed. I think it's just going to be, unfortunately, although we could argue the biggest event of our lifetimes.
This is so curious, isn't it? Because actually, I think a large proportion of the population, certainly in America, does have deep concerns about that day, and yet the mainstream, let's use it again, the mainstream media, which purports to represent opinion in that country, is completely against that. And so there's this disconnect between those two things. And I think that has a social function. I think this is all social engineering going on here, of putting people off talking about these things one to another, even though they may in fact think similar things, because the media's told them not to think, and if they do speak in that way, they're crazy, etc. It's very Orwellian, but I think that's what's going on. How do you change that? Well, this is what the alternative media has tried to do, but I think by and large it has probably been compromised, has probably been kicked off that target in a number of ways.
And the egos, I think, have come into play.
And we know that COINTELPRO, although officially ended, does in fact still continue in different guise. We know that. Well, of course, it's bound to, isn't it? You say it's ended and just carry on. It's not the way.
Give it another name.
Yeah, that's right. There are a whole plethora of names that people can't keep control of and keep changing the names and the personnel and everything.
Exactly.
It does continue, and I take Tom Secker's point on this, that you only need to do a tiny bit and it can have an enormous effect. I keep bringing it up, I think it's a very important point that he made about that conspiracy theories article written by Cass Sunstein and Adrian Vermeulen, a very famous article calling for this cognitive infiltration of conspiracy groups, and of course they were aiming at 9/11 conspiracy groups there, and it talked about various ways of doing this, and the alternative conspiracy scene all up in arms about this, saying, oh, well, that means, if anybody disagrees with me, they're a shill, they're working for the government, they're an informant, blah, 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 blah. And as Tom pointed out, and I think it's a brilliant point, needs to be echoed right across alternative media, is that the very writing of that article itself was the major piece of cognitive infiltration. Just publish it. Cheap, effective, everybody suspects each other. I mean, what a brilliant move that was. Absolutely brilliant. We should be aware of this. It's very easy to derail opposition to authority. If you're in a position of power to do it, it's very easy. And I just wish people involved in this scene were more aware of that, more self-critical, more forgiving of each other. There was less ego in it, as you say, but we're played upon. We're played upon all the time.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I said I have a decent knowledge of psychology, and It's not difficult to do.
No,
A psyop is not difficult if you've got power and reach.
absolutely.
You know, an info is not difficult, and I can
Some
tell
of the
anyone
best
who's
minds.
listening.
What do they do? The intelligence agencies go around Ivy League and, Russell Group universities over here picking off people they want. By and large, they're going to be pretty intelligent people, and they're going to be enculturated into this rather nice lifestyle, and they're miles ahead of most people. Steps ahead. Steps ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. When you said earlier about the media not representing the people, I think this is something that people are cottoning on to, because JFK was November 63, so 2013 we had the 50th anniversary. Huh? No, 63, I think. Okay. 62 was the Cuban Missile Crisis.
You're right. Sorry, I got my wires crossed on that one. That's exactly what it was as well, yeah.
That was an amazing time in the early 60s. It was crazy. Anyway, so they had the 50th anniversary in 2013, and obviously all the news was saying, Lee Harvey Oswald, and I don't know what the percentage now in the latest polls are, but I mean, so many people are not buying that. And it was interesting. This is, again, a bit of a psyop going on here. What came out coincidentally on the 50th anniversary was I think he was Australian journalist, came up with the idea that someone in the car behind JFK shot him by mistake. Obviously, that's just planted there. That represents the alternative explanation. That one, I'm going to say, stupid theory. Like I say, unfortunately, on a daily basis as a teacher, I see this every day. Unless my students do have alternative ideas, which you've said to me before, maybe they just don't want to, they want to hide them because they're a bit embarrassed. I accept that could be the case. But high 90% of my students are intelligent people, but I don't really feel that they're questioning much. I could be wrong, maybe the language barrier, it could be that they're hiding it, but I feel that when this lady I'm talking about, who's in one of my classes, when she talks, they all look a bit confused. She's doing a PhD, she does medical research, and she was telling them how you shouldn't trust medical research at face value.
Right.
And they all looked a bit confused. I feel like we're talking about the stuff we talked about in 2014. It's hilarious.
You reminded me of an article that was written by the chief editor of The Lancet about 3 years ago or something. I can't think his name at the moment. But he wrote, actually, I think it was published in the Lancet, and he wrote a very concerned piece saying that a lot of the research that's produced, medical research, is untrustworthy. It's a real eye-opener. Yeah.
But when I'm saying to you that the world is crazy, when you hear that, what's the amount of deaths that come from misdiagnosis or something?
No idea.
So when you start reading global stats, then you think the world is crazy. I don't know, the amount of people in America who die from heart disease and alcoholism, and the fact that what was spent on a provably illegal war in Iraq could have fed and clothed every single human being on this planet. This is what I'm talking about. But it seems that it still has a cloak of normality about it, because the news is very slick and they talk in this particular way, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, yes.
I
do, and it really annoys me, actually. They sort of are a learned way of speaking, haven't they, some of these people? Yeah. They go, why don't you speak normally?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if you ever look, there's a famous clip of Walter Cronkite announcing JFK's death, and it's the one where he keeps putting his glasses down and kind of holding his head in his hands. It's amazing when you look back on it. Nowadays they'd say, that's not slick enough, But this is what I'm talking about. It's crazy. It's delivering news without emotion and with exactly the same cadence in your voice that every other newsreader's got.
Yes. And not really probing. There are certain things they're not allowed to say. I've noticed it a lot with the Syria thing.
Yeah.
The sorts of questions that I and so many other people have been having, by and large, those are not asked. And you think, well, this isn't proper journalism. Why are you not even asking the question about this? Okay, Robert Fisk writes this article and it goes viral, and I'm thinking, well, is nobody going to mention this? We're contradicting. Basically, according to the guys in charge of that Duma hospital, contradicting the official position on this. Very serious piece of news. Doesn't get a mention. Who are these people? Are they journalists? Are they doing their job? It is amazing. By the way, I found that article. So this is from The Lancet. So this is a quote from it. So this is, what's his name? Dr. Richard Horton, editor-in-chief of The Lancet at the time. So this is actually 3 years ago. Quote, much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue. Afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analyses, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance, science has taken a turn towards darkness. Editor-in-chief of The Lancet.
Wow.
Perhaps half may be simply untrue. I mean, that's a real warning.
Is he still editor-in-chief of The Lancet?
That's a very good point. I don't know.
Or is he on the? He's a tramp on the street now with his reputation in tatters. But hopefully not.
While you're talking, I'll look at thelancet.com and see.
Yeah, like I said, I think we have to blame a lot on this thing about the news cycle, about how things just come and go. But as I said, we're going to make this talk called The State of the World. So we have this Skripal. Is it Skripal? Is that how you say their names? Skripal. Anyway, the Russian poisoning. What was the town that it happened in England?
It was Salisbury.
Salisbury, right. I don't know if we were on air or off air, we were talking about this, but I don't follow mainstream news on a daily basis because I don't believe that listening to the news before you go to work for 10 minutes means you're informed. I just don't think that. So, I mean, I do skim the news, but I don't, in my own mind, I don't think that makes me informed. But I do, when there's a certain case that comes up, I do follow it with interest. I mean, did you follow that one fairly closely?
Fairly closely, because I found it such an insult. Yeah,
that's what I mean.
The basic premise, which a number of people did mention, but it was just the basic premise. Why would Russia have done that? If I was Vladimir Putin, I would not have done that. And as I think I said in the podcast with the interview with Tony Gosling, I said something like, I think Putin is as hard as nails. I mean, you've got to be as hard as nails, haven't you, to do a job like that? But he's neither stupid nor is he crazy. Every time I've seen him, he's clearly not crazy and he's clearly not stupid. So you could say, oh, well, he's evil. But then that's not an explanation, because you would have to be both evil and stupid, or evil and crazy. Do you know what I mean? Just being evil doesn't mean you're going to make stupid or crazy decisions. So it doesn't make sense. Just doesn't make sense at all. And by the way, before we go back onto that, Richard Charles Horton, this is according to Wikipedia, so it must be false, but I'll mention it anyway. Richard Horton, FRCP, FMed-Sci, born 1961, is the present editor-in-chief of The Lancet. There you go. So he hasn't been sacked.
Oh, okay. Not currently to be found on the streets, rifling through bins. No. Yeah. No, I'm pleased to hear he's still there anyway.
Indeed. Yeah.
That's good to know. Yeah, so the Skripal case, what was your reading of that then? And what did Tony Gosling have to say?
Oh, crumbs. We'll listen to the interview. He went further than I would in his assessment of it. Laying blame, etc. If you want to find out about it, go and read Craig Murray's blog about it, because I think he was probably the best writer about it. As I say, I didn't really believe it at face value. I did go through a period of wondering whether it was true at all, and questioning all this Novichok business. Of course, the whole business about only Russia could have produced Novichok was clearly nonsense right from the beginning. Was quickly shown to be nonsense. I mean, why would anybody believe that? So yeah, I mean, choosing a Russian-sounding, obscure chemical agent was pretty obvious to start with. There was this business of them perhaps being poisoned with an opiate, wasn't there? That's what the Salisbury Hospital initially said. There was an opiate poisoning, fentanyl or something. And then some of what the Salisbury Hospital put out was scrubbed on their website, so it was a bit suspicious. I don't know. A lot of people have said, well, if it was something like Novichok, and of course the story evolved into this being this doorknob application. So if they got it on their body when they left the house sometime later, having an effect, is that really Novichok? Isn't it supposed to be this extremely dangerous chemical that has an instant effect? So I wonder whether in fact they were given something else, I don't know, which approximated to some of the symptoms associated with a more serious poisoning, and the people at Salisbury Hospital are told by the experts at Porton Down that this is what has taken place, they're not going to disbelieve that, are they? So they're going to go through the motions of helping these people as best they can, just believing what Porton Down has said. But my inclination at the moment is to suspect the fact they've recovered, the fact that they weren't presenting symptoms as soon as they should have been, that it was something else, not so serious.
But I mean, I did a sort of bit of research about it, but this is a good example of where you don't actually need to know what happened, but you need to know that it's wrong that Theresa May was on TV saying we know it was a Russian thing and that we're supposed to believe that.
Yes.
So we don't need to know exactly what happened to know that that is bang wrong.
And we know that Boris Johnson lied when he said that absolutely he was told that the Porton Down knew this was Russian in source, and then the head of Porton Down comes out saying, well, we can't say. So we know that he lied, and so that's another, well, related to what you just said, very serious thing. And one of the serious things about this, of course, is it's not been acted upon. He's still in position. And
is this, I mean, you're in England. I follow the English news to some extent, but is this case even in the news still, or didn't she come out of hospital recently?
That's right. She came out of hospital, and I'm going to say allegedly because I don't really know what's going on, and gave this speech, which I think Craig Murray said sounded a little bit like it had been prepared. Looking great. Fine. Which makes me again wonder, was it really what they said it was?
There was another ambassador, I think he was the former ambassador to Syria.
Peter Ford.
Peter Ford. Does he have a lisp?
He does. That's the guy, yes. Yes.
Because again, I mean, I've been looking just at a few clips of him on TV programs. And again, my angle is psychology. I think the psychology drives more or less all behavior to me. So, and it's interesting that they will very quickly say, oh, well, you know that what you're saying seems to have... Well, first of all, they'll try and make out that he's fringe.
Yeah.
That's the first tactic. Then they'll prey on the anti-Russian thing and say, oh, your opinion seems to concur with Vladimir Putin, or something like that.
Yeah.
This is what interests me, and this is what I try and alert people to. When you're a bit more wise to this, a bit savvy to this kind of thing, you can see through it a mile away. It's incredible, isn't it?
It is.
You must find that when you...
there's this recent... was it actually held in Leeds in the end? I think it was. The Media on Trial conference. He was involved with that, as was Vanessa Beeley, other characters as well, who were, basically... A lot of it was centred in the media coverage of the Syria thing, the Duma thing. I believe their first venue turned them down. Was it Leeds Town Hall, City Hall, or something like that? Anyway, they did actually meet fairly recently. Yeah, so there was in, I think, The Guardian, is it somebody York? Oh, I wish I remember the name. It was an article. It was absolutely criticising these people and saying they're pro-Assad, running them down, the whole list of people. And I think it even said that one of them had stood on stage with a Holocaust denier or something like that. And I thought, this is just a technique to put people off the scent, Yeah. If you're involved in this kind of thing, it's hard to be so squeaky clean that you have no association with anybody who has a view that's unacceptable. I mean, it's almost impossible. So it's very easy to sift through and find something you can point to like that, which is totally unjustified and obnoxious. But it's a technique, and it works, I guess, on some people anyway.
But you see, it works on intelligent people. This is the thing. It doesn't just work on unintelligent, naive people. It works on almost everyone, it seems. I honestly don't think it takes that much. I mean, I say I go by my daily experiences with educated people in classrooms. And being the way I am, I'm doing my job. I'm teaching them English, but, I try and weave a bit of this in every now and again. And there's just not enough. I don't know. I mean, my question to you, forgive the very broad question, but because you live in England and I don't, when this Russian case came out, did you have any idea of whether people were buying it or whether the average person buys it when they see Theresa May on the news? Would you have any idea, I guess?
No, not really.
No, difficult, isn't it? Yeah. I mean,
here we go.
they always say that...
I've got to mention it here. This is it. It's actually the Huffington Post UK edition, I remember now. The guy is Chris York, and it's called Controversial Event featuring pro-Assad speakers cancelled by Leeds Council.
for other sites.
Yeah, so this is the Media on Trial event. So they did actually go ahead and have it, but this particular venue was cancelled. So it's Professor Piers Robinson of the University of Sheffield, Professor Tim Hayward of the University of Edinburgh, were to speak alongside, among others, a man who has described the Sandy Hook massacre as a mass shooting hoax. Well, that was what it was. It was that instead. Well, just a minute. That's not relevant at all. Were to speak alongside a man who has described the Sandy Hook massacre as a mass shooting hoax. It's just a technique to say, well, don't listen to Piers Robinson and Tim Hayward. How disgusting is that?
Of course, because it's simple. I think this is really what we're coming to. It's this simplicity, and I don't know whether the public cries out for simplicity or just they've been fed so much simplicity that they're conditioned to accept it. I mean, that's a question I wrestle with. Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about, it's just accepting something simple, isn't it? And not needing to look into it much.
It is. It's being open to the most blatant propaganda.
Yeah.
Other speakers listed were... Hold on. Other speakers listed were include... Okay, so it's not grammatical either. Right. Peter Ford, a former UK ambassador to Syria... Right? And so now we have to have this gem of information. Who took over from Bashar al-Assad's father-in-law as head of the British Syrian Society after emails were published showing the former director had advised Assad how to counter videos appearing to show the Syrian regime torturing children. Oh, that's all cobbled.
So it's all right to talk about their propaganda, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's just a sentence cobbled together for a particular purpose. I mean, irrespective of the truth or falsity of any of things that are said there, is carefully chosen for a particular purpose. Vanessa Beeley, a British blogger who campaigns against the White Helmets. Context?
What's the White Helmets?
Well, this group of supposed rescue workers in Syria who allegedly have very deep connections with, and to a large extent, I understand, are almost indistinguishable from those whom Assad would call terrorists. And who are in receipt of Western finance. A deeply suspicious organisation. Deeply. But, a British blogger. Well, that immediately means she's just nobody. She's not a journalist. And she's campaigning against the White Helmets. Well, why would you do that? The White Helmets are whiter than white. There's just no context. Robert Stewart, a man who believes the BBC faked the aftermath of an attack in Syria. Oh, how ridiculous. Well, I don't know. Did the BBC fake the aftermath of an attack in Syria? I'd need to look into that. I don't put it past the BBC to do something like that. There you go. It's just like that. Nasty piece.
Right, I guess we should find some kind of conclusion. I mean, really, I just want to leave on something positive. I don't just want to complain and fearmonger and blah, blah, blah. But... yeah, I feel like we've come full circle, like I said, to the first time we talked. Yeah. But I remember when we were talking about doing a podcast, we had changing the discourse, and you were talking about nuancing the discourse. Mm-hmm. It was nice. So it's kind of, it's the middle ground, I guess you were talking about. So you have, I guess, to one extreme, people who just literally swallow what they read and hear every day. And then you've got the people who just think everything is a conspiracy.
I've been railing against that from day one.
I have you, yeah. Actually, I found a really good podcast, but this is really for the hardcore. It's called Those Conspiracy Guys, and it's looking at the whole thing. It's in a pretty balanced way.
Right. Uh-huh.
And you talked about Sandy Hook, and I don't want to get controversial here. I mean, I don't have a strong view on it either way, but they did a very good podcast. So if anyone would like to just, it's called Those Conspiracy Guys, and they do various ones. It's a bunch of Irish guys. I think they're actually, a couple of them are comedians, so they're funny. They make fun of things, but they're still looking at things in great depth. So that was quite interesting.
Can I say something about Sandy Hook? I don't really want to. I don't want to talk about it as an issue, but I want to mention something that occurred to me when I saw a presentation about it. I formed no particular opinions about the issue itself. But the particular presentation I saw, I don't even remember who it was by, but they pointed to pieces of information which were anomalous. They claimed were anomalous, and this was the big tip-off. Now, watching that presentation, it I mean, I had, and I still do. I'm going to admit this. I do have a reluctance to believe that conspiracy is real. It's just a natural reluctance, okay? And I think actually a natural reluctance is not a bad thing, because it protects us from believing anything that might come across. You know, we have a sort of a high threshold of convince me about things, right?
Yeah.
But because of that natural reluctance, then my eyes were diverted to being a little critical of what this guy was saying, and more thinking about the way he was putting things than the information. And I noted that these particular anomalies could be interpreted in a different way. If they were real anomalies, he wasn't lying about where the police parked and blah, blah, blah. They didn't do things in a normal way. The thought occurred to me, and it has done many times since, it wouldn't take much for, when an event takes place, for somebody in the chain of command somewhere or other to say, look, do things differently. Because then that will get the blogosphere crazy. That will get them all talking about conspiracies coming out of the woodwork, and will then feed into further discrediting of alternative media narratives about everything. It wouldn't take much. If I was trying to counter alternative media, wouldn't I do that? Wouldn't I, place things in odd positions? Because I've noticed this so much since, that people will just find something that's anomalous and they'll make a big deal out of it. And I'm just thinking, you don't really know the provenance of that piece of information. You don't even know whether it's planted deliberately. And there was one example to do with of course, I'm going back through I've told you about bad memory. Where was it? One of these shootings at a nightclub, Orlando, wasn't it? And
Orlando, yeah. A
big thing was made by various people about victims who were being carried along the street. They were filmed, and I saw the films, the genuine film. Victims were being carried in the wrong direction. They were not being carried away from the scene, they were being carried towards it. You see? That shows there's something deeply... It's all staged. You see, they wouldn't be doing... And I thought, well, just a minute. If it's all staged, how does that make sense? From the point of view of somebody who might be staging this, how does it make sense for them to instruct people to carry these victims in the wrong direction? And again, I just thought, how much would it take for somebody to give $20 to you, $20 to you, hey guys, carry this person in the wrong direction, we'll film it, put it on YouTube, and you create a conspiracy when there might not be one. And then it makes us all look crazy. Sorry, it's just a thought that occurred to me, and the Sandy Hook thing just triggered that memory. Again, I'm making no comment about that. I'm making no comment about the Orlando nightclub shooting. It's just this sort of knee-jerk reaction from some people in the alternative media who I think could be dupes of a psychological operation that's very cheap and easy to pull off. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, my feeling with it is that, again, I've never bought into this thing that it's an insult to the victims to question the official line. I mean, that to me is just defending the official line. That is just has a sort of ring of innocence about it and naivety, which I think is, if it's actually a victim's family member who's lost a child saying that would resonate far more with me than a third party saying I shouldn't say that. Because why should you speak for victim? How do you know how our victims' families are feeling? If you've never experienced it, how do you know? Why do you speak for them?
Yes.
So really, I think the point I'm making is not for people to start investigating Sandy Hook. It's don't let people tell you what to question and what not to. There's nothing wrong. You shouldn't feel guilty about researching something because you're curious.
Yeah, I can agree with
that.
And
let's remember, again, going full circle, Yes Minister. Watch a few episodes of Yes Minister. It's a dark world, again, presuming that some of that's true because they did have technical advisors who were actual politicians in quite high places. So I'm going to presume that a fair amount of Yes Minister was more or less accurate, with a little bit of comedy exaggeration.
Oh, sure.
Watch a bit of that, and you've got to realise, this, I'm not talking to you, Julian, but anyone who thinks I don't know what they think we are, but the top of this world is a dark place. There's not I don't think there's too many nice guys that get to the very top. There may be a few, but it's a Machiavellian world. Some would say it's run like the mafia, because I mean, how many suspicious deaths, when you look into it, do you need before you start to think that there are suspicious deaths? I mean,
and how many trillions of dollars do you need to go astray when you're looking at defense budgets? Yeah.
Yeah, well,
which are then available for all kinds of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, just the mere fact that the money that's spent on a provably illegal war in Iraq would have fed and clothed every human being on this planet. I mean, just that alone, of course there's a lot more to it, but...
Yeah, and you reminded me of the interview I had with Dr. Peter Phillips about Bohemian Grove. And I'm glad I did it, actually. This is another one of these big conspiracy things where even if you talk about it, you're a nutcase kind of thing. But actually, he was very measured. I really enjoyed that conversation. He called Alex Jones a shock jock and criticised that movie he made, when he went in there.
John Ronson. With John Ronson.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's the one, yeah. So you've got the footage of the cremation of Care and the worshipping of the owl, all that business, which he corroborated. Yeah, this does take place. But his basic position on it was that actually it is really a rich man's playground, but that although officially policy is not supposed to go on, it does. And his main concern about it was that these are some of the richest and most influential men in the world, and they have money to raise armies. They have vast amounts of resources, and that in itself is scary. I mean, that is actually... Do you need a conspiracy?
You don't.
This is going on behind the scenes. This is completely undemocratic. You've got supposedly democratic representatives who are chin-wagging with some of these most powerful people in the world who have these resources and can do great evil if they choose to do. And we're just supposed to say, that's fine. There are representatives, but they're speaking behind the scenes and we know nothing about it. This is deeply disturbing. I mean, this isn't... it's not the same kind of conspiracy mentality that people think of normally, is it? That it's a cabal who are definitely planning a particular new world order and they're all into the occult and all this, which is not to say I don't believe there... of course there are people who do believe in that kind of thing and there are people who are into the occult, etc. It's just I want to resist the simple view of it, and he agreed with that we should resist the simple view of this, and also he was making the point that if we don't try to understand what they're doing, and if we don't treat them like human beings, but we make them the secret devilish other, then they won't open up. They will be suspicious of us. These are the super elite, and they will be suspicious of us and think we are the barbarians. And we don't want that. We want them to open up more. And I took his point, actually, which is basically this is a dangerous situation. Let's not make it worse by talking rubbish about it.
I mean, John Ronson, who, was sort of a respected mainstream figure, probably questions things a bit more than maybe most in his position. But, yeah, I mean, when he went to Bohemian Grove with Alex Jones, I think the quote that he gave was that Alex Jones came out of it thinking they're devil worshippers. He came out of it thinking they're rich kind of weirdos with a weird fetishes or something like that. He felt it was more of a fetish.
Right.
I mean, we know about Skull and Bones and that they have to lie in a coffin talking about their sexual experiences as kind of part of this, I don't know what it is, a passing out ceremony or I meet a lot of people and I'm a very curious person and I get all kinds of stories. And I am the kind of person that people do tell stuff to. I imagine you are as well, not only on your show, but in life perhaps. And
certain people.
Certain people, right. Yeah. And this American lady, I was very friendly with in Madrid a few years ago. She dated a guy who was part of a fraternity at one of the universities. And she said all kinds of stuff went on. And it didn't mean they're devil worshippers, but it's a dark, strange world.
Right, I can believe
and they were genuinely into some weird stuff. Part of it was, of course, the thing about you want to become part of that, you've got to go through the initiation and you can't question it because you want to be part of it.
Yeah, I'm sure that goes on. And I do think there are these semi-secret societies and completely secret societies, and some of them are involved. Well, it's a big world. Some of them are going to be involved in really dark stuff. Some of them are going to be more powerful than others, of course. But taking something like Bohemian Grove, that's actually quite it's not a cross-section of society, but there's a diverse collection of people there. Okay, they're rich, they're powerful, blah, 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 but to believe that they are all bought into an occult society of the dark arts, I think is, on the face of it, implausible.
Right.
There are so many of them, there's so many people. It doesn't seem coherent to me. It's not like signing up to membership of a particular group, So, okay, so there's evidence of this worshipping, this owl business. Are they really worshipping? I read the words that were spoken. It seemed like very vague nature worship to me. Peter Phillips was saying that he didn't think in most cases it was really worship at all. It was kind of having a good time, and this was a kind of amusing way of everybody joining together to have that good time in a sort of slightly ritualistic way. And I'm not an apologist for them. I'm just finding it hard to believe that it's on a par with some of these secret societies that might have a dark heart and a code that everybody's bought into. Bohemian Grove doesn't strike me as quite like that. And Peter Phillips' research seemed to bear that out, actually.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm deeply concerned about it. So for anybody saying that's just crazy to be concerned, I would say no, be concerned.
Yeah.
Because these are super powerful people and they can raise armies, They're more powerful than countries.
And don't be afraid is what I say. I mean, I've over a number of years, I've removed virtually all of my fear of speaking about anything, really. I mean, I don't have that much to lose, I'm not Chomsky. Yeah, so let's... although I'm loving this conversation, it's getting quite late, so I'm going to have to wrap it up soon, I'm afraid.
Half past midnight for you, is it?
Yeah, getting up to that.
Man, yes.
Who's the fella who did Connections, who was on your show, or you featured him?
Oh, yeah, James Burke, that's right.
James Burke, that's it. Do you remember that quote he said, which is something to do with the world we presented with? Do you remember? I'm sure you played a clip of it or something. I'd be paraphrasing him. It was something like the world...
One of his documentaries, was it?
Yeah, there was one quote I remember. It was something like, the world we're presented with is not what the world is. It was something like that.
Right.
But there are figures in the mainstream who say that, and I think really my takeaway is just for anyone listening to this who's never known of any alternative, the world is not what you think it is. The mainstream media do not present the world as it is. And if you're at all curious, you should start researching and,
And let me add, but not everything is lies.
Exactly, yeah. So we need to
somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's very boring to have a middle ground, of course. It's much more exciting for either or to be true.
I know. And I'm actually not a middle ground kind of person. I often criticize people who say, it's the middle way. And I think, well, no, there are loads of things in life where if you choose the middle way, you're going to get nowhere. Certainly when it comes to questions of truth or falsity, if nothing's true and nothing's false, well, some things are true, some things are false. There's no middle ground. But, there are many things in life where the moderate position does work out, and I think this is one of them.
Well, of course, the other thing is that if you take a line, think of like a really long line, and at the very end of one of it is one extreme, and the very end of the other end is one extreme, which is that everything we're told is true, everything we're told is a lie. How vast is all the bits in the middle?
We're thinking exactly the same thing. It's a function of complexity, isn't it? Exactly. Yeah. The more complex it is, the more data points you're going to have on either side of that line. I totally agree. Whereas if you're talking about truth value of a statement, it's either true or false. You've got one data point. So exactly. So the function of the complexity here is telling us, we've got to think in terms of the middle way, just because we have a high likelihood of getting into error if we polarize on these things too much. Yeah,
and so many things are not either or. I mean, well, Socrates said wisdom is about knowing what you don't know, and I go with that, but I also say that I don't worry about the fact that I don't know much in the grand scheme. But
as you get older, you have to do that, don't you? Otherwise you go mad.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I really like about getting older. I've calmed down a great deal. So Julian, is there anything you'd like to say? Please give out your information about the Mime Renewed, and if there's any final takeaways.
I don't think I've done my final takeaways. I'll certainly give the advert, which is well, here we go. The Mind Renewed, and it's got the subtitle "Thinking Christianly in a New World Order." How about that? Right. And I've had people say, "Oh yeah, New World Order. That means he's into the Illuminati," and just sort of brush me off which is a tremendous state of ignorance, because of course the New World Order is a term that's used regularly and has been for many times in the mainstream by politicians, largely talking about the post-Soviet era. And of course I'm connoting more than that, because I'm asking questions beyond that. But I don't identify the term New World Order with a single Illuminati conspiracy that is trying to take over the world. I just don't. I think that's a small part of what's going on. As I said before, I think there are such groups. So, yeah, thinking Christianly, well, trying to think, and I'm a Christian, so that's thinking Christianly in a new world order. So it's The Mind Renewed, and I speak with people who are of different faiths, obviously a lot of Christians, people who have no faith. When we can agree on things, then if it's a person who's knowledgeable, I'm more than happy to speak to that person to try to get the truth about whatever it might be. And it's themindrenewed.com, which was once HTTP, but now it's HTTPS because it's now a secure site to go to. So there we are.
Oh, good. Yeah. And The Mind Renewed, where does the name actually come from? Are you trying to renew people's minds? Was your mind renewed, or is there anything?
Right, that actually comes from the writings of Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, as he called himself, really. So this is, I've got it here, so this is Romans 12, so the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 2. I might add that it didn't have chapter and verse when it was written, it's just a letter, a long letter, and he says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. And of course that fits really well with what I'm trying to do, because in my own experience, the renewing of my mind was coming to faith and seeing the world in a different way. It was a worldview shift. But, as I said before, my mind was renewed not just in that sense, but seeing the broader lies in the culture at the same time. Yeah. And my website is trying to do that, is trying to be part of the renewing of minds in both senses. Obviously, I'm exuding my Christian worldview through what I'm doing, but I'm also calling to people of faith and of no faith to join in this conversation, because I think so often it's divide and conquer, isn't it? We're put against each other. We allow ourselves to do that. So it's a let's join hands, let's move together forward, hopefully, without compromising our position, because this is another thing that I feel very strongly. It's very tempting to compromise because you want to be friends with people, but I try not to do that. I try to be true to what I believe, and I want other people to be true to what they believe as well, and we respect each other in those positions. And then once we've done that, we talk about the issue at hand, for the good of all, hopefully, and for the good of being transformed in our minds with respect to that particular subject. So that's it, themindrenewed.com. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do a little advert, which I'm sure I did very poorly. I'm no salesman.
No, it's lovely. I mean, the idea of renewal, of course, people say, every day is a chance for, every day is a new start, isn't it? It can be. I mean, I went through a process briefly of basically, when I did realize that something was rotten in Denmark, so to speak, I really went through an unlearning process, and it was amazing, really. It was a process 2 or 3 years, and I felt like my mind was, I don't know, revived, renewed, whatever we want to call it, because I'd unlearned loads of rubbish. So I'd gone back to being almost like an open book, but an open book with a bit of, I don't know what the word is, savvy, or, not naive.
Not naive, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for doing this again.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, indeed. And I hope we'll speak again soon.
Yes, we have plans, don't we, to speak again?
We do, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe during your summer break, that might be good.
That'll be good. And just to give a taster, it's something to do with Adam Curtis, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
We're going to take it from there. Yeah. I was planning, my big project at some point with my blog is to do something about war, because we didn't go into it today. That would be such a huge discussion, but it's just something that is just, I was talking earlier about, is there anything when you were a kid that you would give a signpost to being open to things in the future? I always thought war was a strange thing, even when I was 10. I was like, why is this so normal? Why is this considered normal? I'm not going to go into that now, but just to say thanks again. I'm going to leave. Anyway.
You want me? Oh, yeah, you've triggered me to start talking about all sorts of stuff. We can't, can we? We'll have to leave that to another time.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm just getting warmed up, actually. I'm warmed up and tired at the same
I was
time.
going to speak to Dr. Graham McQueen about this, because he had a thing about ants. He'd done some research on ants and their warfare, and was wondering if there was anything that we could learn from that. And actually, he sent me his paper, which was, I don't think he'd finished with it. He wasn't quite happy with it. But it was really very intriguing and brought up all sorts of questions. But I think he left that research. He felt like he'd reached a dead end with it. He sort of described similarities and differences between ants and humans, but was struggling to reach conclusions. And I could see why that was tricky. What do you conclude from that, you know? So it didn't go anywhere. It was a shame, because it would have been broader than just that research. And of course, he's an anti-war academic in peace research. So that would have been good, but never mind. Maybe someday.
No, I mean, the whole insect thing, man, I've I've been curious about that. I shouldn't go on to another story because we've kind of finished. But
it was some of the similarities, of course, was just that, you know, ants have this complex community with specified roles and that sort of thing. And there's some analogy there to the complexity of human life. Yeah. One of the things he was saying is people think, well, why should there be any connection? Because in terms of evolution, I have questions about evolution, which is not to say, oh, there's a whole can of worms. I'm not a six-day creationist, blah, 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 blah. But I have questions about it. But nevertheless, a lot of people will say, oh, well, you know, the apes are our closest relatives. And they may well be. So therefore, you should look to those communities. It wasn't an evolutionary argument that he was making. It was a complex system argument. And I thought that was interesting as well. He was going quite apart from biological connections to talk about this just the functions of complexity and seeing some connections across there, which was intriguing in its own right. And he did, point out quite a lot of interesting connections, but then didn't get on to many conclusions because it's really difficult to form conclusions about such things. Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, there you go. It's getting late. I'm wandering now.
Basically, I will write something. I think in the summer I'm going to reread a few books to do with wars, and I'll put something together. Maybe that could spark off a talk in the future. But
War as a machine, actually. War as a machine was one of the things he was kind of hypothesizing around. And I thought that was interesting. That war has a kind of life of its own because when people talk about the military-industrial complex, a lot of that could be explained as a machine having its own rules and its own necessity to exist, and so it self-perpetuates, which takes some of the big conspiracy angle out of it, which is obviously not to say there isn't anything, because it takes people to enact things, but it has an inertia which is terribly difficult to stop.
Yeah, because it seems natural to most people at any stage of something what they're doing, because they don't know the big picture. So you can make it that each stage. I mean, I'm rereading actually a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Have you ever come across that, John Perkins?
Yes, I have. I have.
Yeah, I'd recommend that to anyone. It's really interesting. He really shows you how systematic it is, and they did a number on him to become an economic hitman.
Right.
But anyway, I'm going to leave anyone listening to this with a full version of this song that I played a snippet of at the beginning called The Fool's Guide, which is one I recorded last year in Madrid. It's got some great people on it. There's about 8 musicians on it, and it's a good team effort.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for having me on. It's been very enjoyable, actually. Good to speak to you again.
You're very welcome, and we'll talk again soon.
We shall.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Our life are your wife, and people are grunts back to front, and people are dreams, oh, so it seems, and I can't take them right now. I can't take them right now. Can't get out of my bed. There's a thought crime running through my head. Can't take these rules, and people are fools who believe what they read and believe what they see, believe what they see on the TV. Opinions are like iPhones. Everybody's got one, and narcissists are like broken hearts. Everybody knows one. Wipe them out. Wipe them out of my mind. 'Cause I can't take them right now. I can't take them right now. Believe what you read and believe what you see. Believe what you see on the TV. Don't believe them and don't believe me, I'm a tool. Line them up and school them. Give them the tools and they'll use them. Line them up and school them. Or give me a gun and I'll shoot them. Most people are nice, fundamentally nice. Believe in left and right. Believe it's wrong to fight. But they're still tools. Robbers and fake news. A stain on your shoes. And I can't take them right now. Line them up and school them. Give them the tools and they'll use them. Line them up and school them. Or give me a gun and I'll shoot them. All the schools shitting out fools who believe what they read and believe what they see. Don't believe them and don't believe me, I'm a tool. I'm your changes of mood. I'm a drug in your food. Believe what you read and believe what you see on the TV. Don't believe them and don't believe me. Can't get out of my head. There's a thought crime running through my head. Can't take these rules and people are fools.